I am Aisatu Smith. Welcome to the last and final lecture of the series titled Railways Across the Commonwealth. This lecture series has been organized by the Commonwealth Heritage Forum, which is an organization open to all those interested in sharing in the conservation of the built heritage of the Commonwealth. The key aims of the forum are communication, inspiration, conservation, and education, of which this series is a part of. The forum is open to membership from individuals, heritage bodies and trusts, professional practitioners, and academic institutions. More information on how to become a member can be found on the CHF's website, so do check it out. The forum is also engaged in several heritage skills training projects, for example, in Hyderabad, India, and at Rubok Street, Barbados, with more such projects set to commence in 2024 in other Commonwealth countries. Information about this is also found on the CHF's website. I will introduce the speakers for today's lecture, which is titled That Train for Bo in a minute, but please note that this lecture is being recorded, so please stay muted except during the question and answer session, when you may unmute to ask a question or respond to one. Please raise your hand if you do wish to speak, and I will facilitate the question and answer session later. You can also send your questions to the chat box if you wish. We have two speakers for today's lecture, both of whom I'm proud to call my friends. Helen Ashby is a graduate in modern languages, Spanish, with economics from Bradford University, and she holds a postgraduate diploma in museum studies. She joined the National Railway Museum in New York as a clerical officer on a 6-month contract in July 1982, retiring as head of knowledge and collections in February 2014. She had a responsibility for building, caring for, and providing public access to the museum's collections of artifacts, documents, photographs, and archives. She is a fellow of the Museums Association. Whilst working at the NRM, Helen was asked to provide some specialist training for staff from the newly formed Sierra Leone National Railway Museum, and she made her first visit to Sierra Leone in 2011. She is the founding chair of the Friends of the Sierra Leone National Railway Museum and spends several weeks a year at the museum as a volunteer. Steve Davies is a former British Army infantry officer in the rank of colonel who has enjoyed a lifelong passion for railways. He was posted to Sierra Leone in 2004 as a military advisor to the late President Kabar, the start of a love affair with the country, and it was during this time that he realized the threat to the remnants of the Sierra Leone Railway and took rapid steps to protect the remaining locomotives and stock. Using his own money, Steve put together a team of local lads and established what was to become in due course the Sierra Leone National Railway Museum, which is now thriving. His achievements were recognized in the United Kingdom, and this indirectly led to him becoming the director of the UK's National Railway Museum in New York. Steve now heads up an international railway heritage consultancy in partnership with Helen Ashby, his former #2 at the National Railway Museum in New York. Helen will set the scene with a short introduction to the history of the Sierra Leone Railway from the late century until its closure in 1973 railway vehicles after the 11-year civil war in Sierra Leone National Railway Museum. Helen will then bring the story up to date with a brief resume of the museum today and the amazing services that it offers. So over to you, Helen. Over to you, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan, can you enable participants' screen sharing, please? So during the late 19th century, there were a number of early proposals for a railway in Sierra Leone. And Sierra Leone's own Edward Blyden was a keen advocate for the railway. The first proposal in 1872 included a proposal for a trans-Saharan railway, but it never happened. However, in 1893, a proposal for a railway from Freetown, promoted by the Liverpool Chamber of Commerce, was accepted and work began. Work began in 1896. Sir William Shelford, who you see here, was appointed to survey for the new railway, and at the same time he was surveying in Gold Coast, now Ghana, and in Lagos State in Nigeria for those railways to be constructed, and construction started there at the same time. This book of drawings was donated to the National Railway Museum in York by the Crown agents to the colonies in 2015, and it appears to be the absolute original survey drawings by William Shelford for the railway, and the detail in them is absolutely amazing and has taught us a huge amount about the railway that we didn't know before. The gauge chosen for the railway was 2'6", partly to keep costs down, smaller is cheaper, but also to cope with rough terrain and to avoid having to do things like tunnelling under the hills, because a narrower railway can more easily go around the contours. But also it's small enough to export as a kit of parts. Construction started in Kleintown, which is the east end of Freetown, which was then the site of a disused racecourse, meaning that there was a large tract of empty land with space to bring material in, store it, build the workshops, railway sidings, and to store equipment. And the first train ran to Wellington in 1897, following the first period of construction. So construction started in Kleintown and moved eastwards towards the Liberia, towards the interior of the country, and westwards towards the coast and the centre of Freetown at the same time. It took a long time to get to the coast because there was a deep ravine called over Nichols Brook, and they had to build a massive bridge to get over that. And that's partly why construction started where it did and went in two directions at once. Here you see one of the construction trains with the little hopper wagons built in Leeds, used for moving stone and ballast around. Sorry, I just need to go back one. The railway reached Waterloo in 1898, and then the official opening of the railway, when it was completed as far as Songo, as you go off the Freetown Peninsula and into the mainland. A successful trip was made to Waterloo on the 1st of April 1898, and public excursions started from Kleintown immediately. And then the whole of the line so far was opened on the 1st of May 1899, with a grand opening at Water Street Station in the centre of Freetown, a building which is still there, and followed by a special train to Songo, where a special lunch was provided for the dignitaries. This little map shows the extent of the railway, so all the way from Freetown in the west along to a town called Pendembu in the east, past the second city of Bow, past the barracks at Daru, and approaching the Liberian border. I understand that original plans were to go into Liberia, but they never got that far. And then at mile 64 at Bowyer Junction, there's a branch line that went off to the north, up to the northern city of Makeni. There was some extraordinary material exported from the UK. I'm just going to flick through these quickly to show you the scope of locomotives and things that were used there. These 060s were particularly used on the Mountain Railway, which is a short branch going up to the officers' quarters at Hill Station, also from Water Street and past the Cotton Tree. It was a town railway. The railway went right through the streets of Freetown, and you know, you can picture the market traders moving out of the way as the train came up the hill out of the town. And then as you go out go eastwards, you went over this fantastic high viaduct, which is a very curved viaduct. Really interesting. Sadly, it was destroyed in 2012 by scrap metal thieves. This is Bow, the second city. Passengers throng to get to the train and to sell their goods. And this is one of a class of garrets that was used, one of which survives. Not this particular one, but it's a particularly nice photograph. The railway, it never made a profit, other than I think the years were 1923 and 1948. It actually made more money than it cost to run. But by the mid-1960s, Solomon Pratt, who you see here in this picture, was keen to, he was general manager of the railway and a politician, and he was keen to refurbish the railway, which had become rather run down post-war. And he wanted to broaden the gauge to make it match the rest of Africa and make it more stable and faster. And he put in a proposal for it to be broadened to 3'6" gauge. The proposal went to the World Bank and a feasibility study was done. And it came back suggesting that the road infrastructure should be improved and the railway should be phased out. Which is a terrible shame, but it was the fashion at the time. Road transport was becoming more popular. The same was happening in the UK with the Beeching Act, more or less the same year. The branch lines in the UK were closing when the decision to close the railway was made. It caused Solomon Pratt's resignation, but nevertheless, he had to go with the advice. Richard Norman, who was trained in British Railways and was invited back to go and become general manager of the railway. And the job he was given was to actually phase it out. The section from the city to Kleintown closed first, and the branch line from McKenney closed in 1968. And after that, he started gradually pulling the railway up and bringing it back towards Freetown by rail. And this photograph shows him with the garret that's preserved in the museum on the very last passenger train, which was on the 17th of November 1974. Trains ran on a sporadic basis then until 1975. As they brought the track back and brought things back for scrap. And the final lifting of the track in August 1975 put a final close to the railway. Interestingly, it was Richard Norman who thought that it was wrong that the country's entire railway heritage should be lost. And he, along with his chief mechanical engineer, I.O. Cole, selected significant pieces from what was left and closed them in the former carriage body shop at Kleintown and more or less locked the door on them. And that's where I'm going to hand over to Steve to tell you what happened after that.
Thank you, Helen. Can you confirm you can see that slide?
Yes.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on the right, in case you're struggling with to identify that. I've been a railway nut for many years. I'm not a museum professional, although having had the privilege of leading a national UK museum, I suppose one could argue that I now am. But wherever I've gone in the world, I've always done a lot of preparation to see what was going to interest me from a railway perspective, and there was no difference. I was posted to Sierra Leone as military advisor to the government, to the president, in the wake of the rebel war, which Sierra Leone is recovering from quite rapidly, although there was, you may or may not be aware, because it's not widely reported, there was a coup attempt in Sierra Leone about a month ago, which has slightly unsettled things, but we're pretty sure that the country will emerge from that too. Helen mentioned Songo. That was Songo Station. It's still there. And my role allowed me to get out and about. But prior to deploying, I had to go to the Foreign Office for a briefing. And I popped into a bookshop on the Strand called Motor Books. And as I peered through the window, this book was being placed into the window. I thought, oh, gosh, that's interesting. So I popped in, I bought it. It was the first copy they sold. It literally just come out. And I digested this and managed to make a plan in my mind about what I would go and look for. I arrived on a Thursday. On a Saturday, got into my Land Rover and took an army colleague of mine who I'd known for many years, said, come on, let's go and have a bit of an explore, and ended up at Kleintown Works and drove in to be faced with quite a melancholy sight. And this is, these are chunks of Garrett, those tanks, and the Chinese had been given a long lease on the factory, and they were literally cutting up everything. And a chap said to me, a Chinese gentleman said, are you from the government? I said, yes, but Ministry of Defence. Why? He said, have you come to take the trains away? And I thought, what? This is horrendous. But we went over to this building and I peered in through the windows and I nearly fell over immediately when I saw that inside this building was the aforementioned collection that Helen has just referred to, which by now was in a pretty sorry state. I had a good look around, but I couldn't go in. And so the Chinese gave me the phone number of the gentleman who had been looking after this lot. And that's him on the left there. That's Mohammed Bangura, the late Mohammed Bangura, my mate. Mohammed was the last general manager of the National Workshops. When the railway closed, the factory carried on as the engineering base for the country. And I'd been on the Saturday, I rang him up, and on a Sunday he met me, and he had a key, and we went around. And it was a sight not for the faint-hearted. And I'll just do quick, because one of the key things to look at here is the sheer contrast between what it was, and how it is today. And literally, if I had arrived 1 week later, this lot would have gone to the scrapyard. I mean, the serendipity involved is extraordinary. So this is the Sunday tour. That's the Garrett that Helen showed you a photograph of. This building and this area had been occupied by up to 10,000 displaced persons during the Rebel War. And not surprisingly, if stuff wasn't bolted down, it was fair game. Having said which, that's a Leeds-built Hunslet 262 tank engine. There is one other of those left, and that's Helen described as on the Welshpool Railway, is operational. And that's another view of it. The displaced persons use this as a shelter, and they caused obviously quite a bit of chaos, but there was a huge amount survived. If this was in the UK context, everything would have gone. But the Garrett is in fundamentally great condition. We've got four diesels. These are all Leeds built by Hudswell Clark. That particular one actually hauled the very last train in 75. The steam engine that you heard about pulled the last passenger train, and this diesel hauled the very last works train, if you like. Notice in the pits all that the muck and grime. I'll refer back to that later. Classic British diesels. This is an 18-line Gardner for those who have an interest. And that is a Wickham's rail inspection vehicle. Interestingly, that vehicle has sparked more inquiries from enthusiasts in UK than virtually everything else, because believe it or not, there's a group of people who are absolutely obsessed with Wickham's products. Now, this was the interesting one. That forlorn looking machine, that carriage, turned out to have been built for the state visit of Her Majesty the Queen in 1961 after independence. And the plan was she would go from Freetown up to Bow with that in that coach, with that wonderful balcony. Mohammed Bangura had been involved in constructing it, so we had a good idea about what to do with it. But sadly, the program was changed at the last minute, and it was decided that she would fly up to Bow, which is a great tragedy because all the villages along the railway had prepared to see the Queen. So a fantastic opportunity was lost. And I can only imagine the disappointment amongst paramount chiefs and others when they were told that the Queen's train was not going to come down. And no doubt it was a bureaucratic decision, but it took no account of the impact this train would have had. And the whole point of the visit was to re-cement relations between Sierra Leone after independence. Anyway, that was looking pretty forlorn. And here's some more views of that coach. That was the governor's carriage, built in, I think, Helen, 1915. And we have done a lot of research into this. This is the next major conservation project. It's been stabilized. It's in very good condition now. But Helen had an amazing discovery on the most recent visit, and that a chair that was being used by Mohammed Bangura and was in the museum also appeared in photographs from when this coach was built and is one of the original chairs. And that might not excite you, but it certainly excites us. So there's the governor's coach. These are what were called independence coaches, and these were gifted by the UK on independence in 61. And the British left Sierra Leone in comparatively good nick. The equivalent in today's money of 45 billion pounds was spent by the UK, helping Sierra Leone to prepare for its independence. And I think we can be proud of that. This is a conventional carriage, and in the far one is a general manager's saloon. But I think you get a feel for, I mean, it's a battlefield, literally and metaphorically. This was a very interesting vehicle. This is a goods vehicle. This was, passengers made money, but it was the goods that made the money. This vehicle was ankle deep in the paper records of the workshops, much of which we obviously kept and conserved. So I'd arrived on a Saturday. On a Sunday night, after I'd done that tour, I'm chatting away with a guy from the intelligence world. He and I were going to see the president on the Monday. The president is the gentleman there in the grey suit. And at the end of my first meeting with him, I said, "Can I raise another matter with you?" His officials looked aghast. And he said, "What?" And I said, so I explained what I'd found, and there was an opportunity. And all of a sudden, President Kaba came to life. This chap had been on the wrong end of a couple of coups, and he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, trying to get his country back on the straight and narrow. And he had no time for what I call luxury or thoughts other than the survival of the nation. And all of a sudden, some crazy colonel comes along and flicks his switch on the subject of railways, and he had massively fond memories. So he said, "Right, what do you think?" So I said what we might be able to do. He said, "Right, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, you be at the factory. I'll bring the whole of my cabinet, a film crew and the Chinese. You do all the talking." So this is, and that's the book. I gave him the book that I'd bought only a week before. And so I've arrived on a Thursday, and already on a Tuesday, I'm showing the president around his railway workshops. So long story cut short, this led to Davies saying, "Well, I can get on with something here." I realized the government didn't have two brass farthings to rub together, and so my own money went into getting it going. And I pulled this team together, and this is quite the most extraordinary experience, bringing together lads you just didn't know, trying to identify their skills, and a significant number of people in that picture from 19 years ago are still working in the museum. And I'm really, really proud of that. It's quite extraordinary. So we got to, and we cleaned, and we cleaned. You notice the pit is empty there. It's like a time team dig. The boys would be digging in there, and then they'd shout, "Colonel, Colonel," and I go running over, and there'd be a firing shovel, and we found a driver's cap badge and some gold leaf lettering for coat. It was an amazing journey in itself, getting this stuff ready. You've got to show a bit of leadership, and I was frequently manky as hell trying to get this stuff going. But slowly but surely, we made progress. Abdul on the left there, still with the museum team. I think Helen was pointing out, had no family then, but is now got his own children and wife now. So we started painting and trying to bring some kind of order to this place. The guys, you'd find skills. So this guy was brilliant at painting, but he didn't want to paint. He wanted to do something else. But he was hopeless at everything else. I said, stick to the painting, please, because you are good at it. And you can see the results. I mean, this whole thing started to look absolutely amazing. We then set onto the Queen's coach, and in fact, the Queen's coach just recently has had to have some fairly major surgery done on it to get rid of termites. These are not challenges one finds in a British museum. So we came up with a fairly basic restoration of the Queen's coach, and that just to show you how it used to look, and that's the result. And there is now a display in there which effectively celebrates the British-Sierra Leone relationship. Those two coaches, the near one was completely shot at. The president gave him permission to scrap it and to use the timber from it to repair the far one. So those two then became that. This is the governor's coach, looking a hell of a lot better. And everything is now starting to look sparkling. The boys are really enjoying it. There's a fantastic team spirit, actually. It's like being back in the army. It was bringing together, and of course, because I had access to military resources, God bless the British taxpayer, we were using a lot of material that the army's budget allowed us to buy, and I put it down as a community project. That was how. Well, the accountants never came looking for me. So this whole thing is now looking pretty splendid, and we've done a lot of work. We have relationships with various bodies in the UK. Nelly, the Manning Wardle loco, had brand new plates made for it by a benefactor in the UK, and that's how it looks now. And if you just cast your mind back to those original photos, and we're talking about a year initially to get to this condition, is extraordinary. So we had an opening event. It wasn't quite ready to open, but there was a lot of interest in what was going on. And so I managed to get Andrew Scott, the director of the National Railway Museum in UK, to come out as our guest. And that helped to put the project on the map, because the railway journals and so on would watch what Andrew was up to. This is the Milton Margai School for the Blind in Freetown, and their choir is absolutely angelic, and they performed for us, and they did 2 renditions of the Sierra Leone national anthem and our own national anthem, and then they had composed a railway song, not the Train for Bow, which is what we all sing, but and it was just an amazing event. And these were people queuing up, and 4th from the left is Andrew Scott. 3rd from the left is Mr. Rajiv Bendre, who was the head of the British Council out there at the time. And the president came along, and we had a big opening event. And here's former railway employees and so on. And we finished off the event with this group photographed. Pleased as punch that we managed to pull this off. The president in the middle, Andrew to the right of him as you look at it, me to the left, and there's the boys with their homemade identity badges, which they were desperate to have. They wanted to do that, and very, very happy days. But it has moved on significantly from those humble beginnings. I'm now going to return you to Helen, and I think we're doing quite well for time here. So, Helen, are you? I'll stop share. Over to you.
So times have changed quite a lot. Over the years, we groups of us have been there, have talked to the guys, asked them what direction they'd like to take the museum. In 2014, a group of us decided that as the National Railway Museum in York had been the kind of the focus for providing support from time to time to the museum, but we were starting to face government cuts, make staff redundant, etc. So we decided that the best way to be able to continue support was to form a charity. So we formed the Friends of the Sierra Leone National Railway Museum, and there was a core of us who were NRM York staff and various people we'd been in touch with over the years who'd expressed interest in Sierra Leone. So that's enabled us to raise funds through memberships, through donations, through souvenir sales and things, in order to be able to provide some significant support. And also it's meant that people can find us. We created a website, we've created a Facebook page, and people can find us. So when people have got material from the Sierra Leone Railway, photographs, they've been able to get in touch with the Friends, and we've been able to facilitate those objects being returned to Sierra Leone and forming part of the national collection there. We've done a few things that have been grant funded. We did an endangered archives project funded by the British Library, which meant that we could digitise photographs and documents and material from the National Archive at the University of Sierra Leone. And they're available online on the British Library's Endangered Archives Project website. I've just come back from there a couple of weeks ago, and I have to say this visit was one of the most dynamic I've made. I've been going since 2011, as Aisatu said earlier, but the visitors this time were much more regular, more of them, and we started to get some really high profile visitors. So the people here, the guy holding his jacket over his arm is Ziad Dalul, who is the owner and CEO of AfriCell. And he came with he's based in London, but he came with his senior teams from London and from Freetown to look around the museum. And he was absolutely fascinated with what he saw and quite interested in supporting. So we're not kind of chasing him at the moment, softly catchy monkey, but I'm hopeful that, you know, if they can't provide the best broadband services in Africa, at least they can maybe support culture and heritage. So that would be really nice. Well, I don't know what happened there. The couple on the left on the pump trolley are a couple of guys who are working with the an ex-servicemen's association that distribute funds, charitable funds, to veterans who've served throughout the Commonwealth. And the exact name of the organisation escapes me. I think it's ex-Commonwealth or Commonwealth Ex-Servicemen Association. And they were in Sierra Leone only for 3 days, distributing money immediately before the Remembrance Day parade to a number of former soldiers or former soldiers' widows. So I'm really proud that they chose the Railway Museum for one of their visits in that very short time. On the right, you see the guy in the black t-shirt is the Defence Attaché with the British High Commission, came on a private visit with his wife and friend. I was really grateful because it meant I had his email address and his phone number. And when I needed advice during the apparent coup, I was able to ring him and ask him what we should do. But again, really a privilege to have him visiting the museum. Then the little group, this is just to show a range of visitors really. The little group on the left are volunteers and staff from the Mersey ship. The Mersey ship arrived in August and is staying in Freetown for 10 months. And they're performing medical services, surgery, and all kinds of health benefits to citizens. And because the docks is quite close to where the museum is, we get regular visitors coming from the Mersey ship because it's somewhere that's of interest to them and easy to get to in their few hours they have off. And the guy with the motorbike, it was fascinating, intrepid traveller. He flew to London from Montana in September, bought himself a motorbike in London, drove through France and Spain and across the Strait of Gibraltar, and then has driven all the way down the west coast of Africa, ending up in Freetown for a few days before going on all the way down the rest of the west coast of Africa to South Africa, and then he's going up the east coast. And he might, if he feels like it when he's done that, he might go to the Middle East. But gosh, what a guy. And there were a lot of photographs taken of him and his bike because the staff in the museum were fascinated. Then we have the schools. November and December are the period of school visits for this term. Field trips tend to be done on a termly basis. So towards the end of each term, we get this sudden influx of children. And when they say school visit, they mean school. They don't mean class. They bring the entire school. So you can have upwards of 200 children in the museum, and they come for the whole day. So some of them come for a couple of hours and then go off to another venue because they're doing a tour of cultural sites, but a lot of them stay for the whole day. So you see Mohammed Jabi on the far left, he's doing the welcome, and then he'll do a guided tour with them. And then we do activities, craft or art activities with them. Everybody has a ride on the pump trolley. They have their lunch there. And then we created a play area a few years ago. So there's play equipment for them to play on. They play games in the compound. Sometimes they bring a set, as they call it, a PA system, and they put music on and dance. And it's a lovely place for schools because the compound is enclosed and we can close the gate and keep them safe. Whereas previously a lot of school visits, to find a place big enough to take a school where there's things for them to do, it's tended to be the beach, and there's a lot of risk associated with that. So the Railway Museum is providing a really safe space, and we've done that for special needs groups as well, because it's somewhere where they can close the door and they don't get stared at, they can't endanger themselves. It's just wonderful to see. Adeline School were absolutely delightful. They're twinned with Stepney School in Hull, and they were really, really excited to find that we'd just launched an exhibition that was about the twinning between Freetown and Hull. And they even found some pictures of their teacher in the exhibition. And again, they were lovely. They were a smaller group, but they stayed all day. They did colouring activities, they did dance, spelling competitions, singing, dancing, everything you could imagine. Most of it focused around the railway, but some of it just for fun. And then not only do we have the school visits, but we use the spaces for community activities. It's the biggest public space in the east of Freetown at the moment. So we get all kinds of charities and special interest and educational groups come in to do workshops in the museum. And this one was about women education for girls, but it's a way of other people being able to connect with the community and provide these useful spaces for training. I think Aisatu did a workshop there about the refurbishment of Fora Bay College as part of a public consultation. So the museum plays a big part in the local community, as well as just being a railway museum. And these are the people attending the workshop. We also go out to schools, and as Steve mentioned, we've been setting up these railway heritage clubs in schools. The schools that were selected initially for them are schools that have remains of the railway in their compounds. So this is Ahmadiyya Agricultural Secondary School at Newton, which has Newton Railway Station in its grounds. And you see the kids with the T-shirts on are the president and vice president. And the kids themselves have elected their executive committee. They formed their constitution, and they took us into the station building to show what they'd been doing. And they've cleared it of rubbish that's blown in. The building's derelict. I think it was probably destroyed during the Civil War. But vegetation takes over very quickly. But the kids go in there and they clean all the vegetation out, keep the place clean. They've asked us if we can support them with some tools so they can reach higher up to get the vegetation out of the cracks in the walls. So that's something I'm going to be discussing with Friends trustees in due course. And they'd also like to find a way of creating a roof in part of the building so they can use it as their meeting room. And I've promised them, because we came across some photographs of Newton Station when it was first new, I've promised them that I'll get those printed in A3 and get them framed so that they can display them at the school. And this is my last slide, which I just want to play a little video for you. This is at Bowyer at the junction, and this school also is doing cleaning around the railway station, but they also do cultural activities and song and dance. And this is the Bow Train song, which is something that we've kind of revived from older people's school days, and we now use as kind of the museum song, if you like. Oh, no, that didn't work. Let me just share that slide again. Go right to the end.
You can sing the song if you wish.
I really, really wanted you to see Bowyer singing it. Let me just, down here. I played this perfectly well earlier. Don't know if it's going to play. There you go. Oh. So I'm going to stop sharing there. I'll just give you the words to the song so that you can understand it. It's the train for Bow, in no one grief for go. The train for Bow, in no one grief for go. The train for Bow, he tire because he no get fire. The train for Bow, he no grief for go. Now that's in Creole, but I think if you're an English speaker, it's easy to actually translate because the words are pretty much the same. And then the second verse is driver, do ya, that's please. Driver, do ya, gear plenty fire. So put more fire in. The train for boat he tire because he no get fire. The train for boat he no agree for go. So that's the end of the song, and it's the end of our presentation.
And now I'll sing it for you. That train for boy, no one good for go, for go. That train for boy, no one good for go. That train for boy, it tire because he no get fire. That train for boy, he no one good for go. He go go.
Go.
Thank you very much. He for go. He go go. Thank you very much, Helen and Stephen, for that wonderful presentation. We will now move on to a few, maybe 7-8 minutes of question and answer session. I don't see any hands up, and I don't see the question that was on the chat box. Steve has already answered, but the floor is now open for a brief question and answer session. Just raise your hands if you wanna ask a question, or you can post your question in the chat box.
It's not a question as such, but I was wondering if you could post the links to the website and the Facebook page you were talking about, Helen, into the chat, just so that if people want to go and have a look, they can.
Yeah, I will. I'm just taking a
Thank you.
photograph of that message because it's got contact details.
Yeah.
Sarah, was your hand up?
Um,
Can I just?
No, I was just applauding your singing. Thank you very much, and the whole presentation, which I loved. Really loved it. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just
Davies?
can I just raise a point about the work of the Friends? I mean, one of the objectives of the Friends obviously is to raise money to do things that are over and above the budget that's available to them from the government. The museum is a wholly owned national museum in Sierra Leone, one of only 2 National Rail Museums in the world, one in Freetown, one in York. One of the key projects we funded was £10,000 to drill a well to give the museum a regular and reliable water supply, and that has utterly transformed the museum. We take water for granted here, but a regular supply of water, and in particular in terms of their ability to keep on top of dust and grime and therefore protect the collection, really good. You know, the boys, when they first got a cup of water out of the ground, and the well is quite deep, you know, it tastes sweet, sir. It tastes sweet. A priceless moment.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Julian, I see your hand is up. Julian?
So I didn't unmute myself. Couple of things. The map is slightly short because it was a branch line extended north of McKenney, what we call the barrier extension. Yeah. And I do have a map somewhere with it on. They never quite got to barrier. The earthworks were done to about 12 miles south. That got stopped by the First World War. 2 interesting photos. You had one of the 282s. It's the first photograph I've seen of a 282 beyond the actual Hunslet works photo. And you had one of the 060s with a name on. I think Helen and I were talking about that last week, was it? Mm-hmm. I knew they had names cast at Hunslet for some of the logos. I've got no record of which ones went on. The other thing about the making the money, I think it was only about 3 years they didn't cover the loan charges. They made an operational profit beyond, you know, the running costs fairly frequently, but it was the covering the actual loan costs which did a lot of the damage and brought about. It wasn't the ITAL consult, it was Transportation Consultants, I think, an American company from New York.
Yeah, I see.
Who said at some stage the railway had never made a profit. I've got my doubts about exactly what was said when they decided to close it down. Yeah. And my other thing is that, who was I forgot his name, I should know it. Sese, as the general manager, my records are that he wanted to convert it to 4'8.5", not 3'6".
Oh, I'd understood it was Richard Norman that told me it was 3'6", but he might be misremembering. He was very ill and very old when I spoke to him.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I think there's a lot of myths, I would say, grown up. But yeah, the records at Kew say that he wanted it to be standard gauge, which wouldn't have fitted in with anywhere else in Africa, except for I think probably Egypt and possibly Algeria.
Okay.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution, Julian. We barely have 6 minutes left. I think we'll give some. Nicholas, I think your hand is up too. Nicholas.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks.
we can.
Thanks very much. That's been really heartening to see and to hear what an individual or a small group can do in a place-based project. There's something about a project having a clear location, and I think there would be interest from both the Commonwealth Girls' Education Fund and the Commonwealth Association of Museums, which doesn't necessarily include the small museums. And the current president of CAM, the Commonwealth Association of Museums, is based in Cape Town, so she might be particularly interested. But I think it would also be good to be able to identify other projects. Stephen mentioned, I think, £10,000 to drill a well. The difference that sort of sum can make in the Freetown or the Sierra Leone context is just so much bigger than what we might spend monies on in the global north. So I just say thank you very much. But if you want me to help put you in touch with the Commonwealth Girls' Education Fund or Commonwealth Association of Museums, I'd be very happy to do so. So,
Nicholas,
yes,
could you put
thank you very much.
Nicholas, could you put your contact details on
the
contact? Yeah, in the chat box. And finally, John will have the final comments or question. We only have 4 minutes left.
Yeah, again, congratulations on both the achievement of the museum, the splendid presentation. I've got really two questions. First of all, is there any significant industry in Sierra Leone that might require the reintroduction of railways, whether standard gauge or narrower? And secondly, the museum obviously is a very valuable asset for what we might call industrial tourism or archaeological tourism. How much is the museum attracting by way of visitors from beyond Sierra Leone?
Okay, I'm gonna have you put your email address in the chat box, John, because I guess we may not have enough time for Helen and Stephen to answer this question, but it is very interesting, and I'm sure they'd like to continue the conversation with you. So please put your contact info in the chat box so that Helen and Steve can
John,
respond to it. Steve, I see you just a brief response, and then
John, very briefly. There is now 130 miles of 3'6" gauge track carrying iron ore. The original 50 miles plus an extension that was built about 15 years ago. So rail is moving iron ore now as we speak, and I think Helen was watching 100 wagon trains. The 2'6" gauge will not come back. It was too tiny a thing, but we can come back to you, Helen, on the second question in a bit more detail, I think.
Yeah, I will email you.
Smashing.
Okay, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I want to thank Helen and Steve very much for taking us on the fascinating journey of the Sierra Leone Government Railway and how its relics form the nucleus of the National Railway Museum. As we have learned, this railway was unique in the sense that it was constructed solely as a 2 feet 6 inches narrow gauge, which in most other countries is confined to feeder railways. You've also shared with us how the Sierra Leone National Railway Museum came into being and how you continue to support its operations and growth. I know I speak on behalf of all Sierra Leoneans when I say we are very grateful for your continued support. Let me thank the CHF for organizing such a fascinating lecture series and for giving me the opportunity to be a part of it. I have learned greatly, as I'm sure all of us have. This concludes this series, but I'm sure we'll soon embark on another fascinating lecture series. Thank you all for your attention. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Aisatu. Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Helen.
Thank